So we're in chapter 5 of your government book, and we got through the first section and onto the second section, and we're going into how a bill becomes a law. Now I got all the way up to like presidential action of the bill. So, and then I got a phone call, so I had to stop. So we're just kind of continuing here in chapter 5. So it's very interesting. So I want to, in brief, it says how a bill becomes a law. I'm going to go over this because I think it's pretty important that you understand how a bill becomes a law. You may be proposing a bill to become a law in your lifetime. This diagram shows the most typical way in which a proposed legislation, that is a bill, is enacted to become a law. There are more complicated as well as simple routes, and most bills fall by the wayside and never become a law. Only like 10% of the bills that are introduced become law. So that's, not many, 10%. So here's the introduction here. As you can see in this picture, you see most legislation begins with similar proposals in both houses. So each bill has to go through each house. So it's introduced in the House, and then it goes through the committee action, which is the hard part here, and it's referred to the House committee. And then the House committee may refer to subcommittees to go over it more, and then these subcommittees have to bring them back to the regular committees, and they have to vote on the regular committees, and this is where they hold the hearings and they recommend passage. Most of the bills fail in the committee action, and they're either pigeonholed or basically voted on not to, and basically got rid of most of them in the committee action. And then from the committee they go to the floor action, and the floor action is where the House, this is the House, this side's the House, the red is the House, and this is the Senate. And so the House floor debates and passes on there on the midst, whether it passes or not. But anyway, the bill, since it passed the committee, goes to the floor, and that's where the debates happen, on the floor. They're on the floor debating on things, and then it can go into a law, but the president has to sign it into a law. But before it goes through the House, it has to go back up here, and it has to go through the Senate. Or if it starts in the Senate, it has to go through the House, whichever way. So in the Senate, it's referred to the Senate committees, the same thing as the committees, and the debates happen on the floor. The weird thing about the Senate is they could have what's called a filibuster, and that's when they delay the bill till the bill cannot go so the bill cannot go through. A filibuster is where they just sit around talking about whatever they want. Even some senators just sit around and read the phone book when we had a phone book, or read the Sears Roebuck catalog, or they just actually say whatever they want to filibuster, and that happens in the Senate. In the House and Ways Committee prevent that from happening a lot. The Speaker of the House. So then the president can either sign it into law or veto it and say, no, I don't want it in a law. Or if they veto it, they have to go all the way back. It goes all the way back, and then of course they have to vote on it again. So also the president can pocket veto. That means he knows that there's only a certain amount of time of 10 days, and then there'll be a closure to the actions on the floor. The Congress will close up at that time. So when that happens, it just pocket vetoes. It goes into nothing. It stops. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So anyway, I kind of went over there in the last. Here's a picture of filibuster. Here's a senator that sat around and filibustered for 24 hours. Senator Strom Thurmond from South Carolina. So, and that's on the floor. So, so let's go through here how a bill becomes a law. First of all, it's drafted. That means it must be introduced by a senator or a congressman. Although anybody can propose a bill to a senator and a congressman, and then the congressman has to present it. And this is where it's introduced. The bill is introduced and can be either in the House of Representatives or the Senate. All money bills, anything to do with money, have to go to the House of Representatives. Senate does not deal with any types of taxes or money or anything like this. So then it's read by title, numbered, and registered and printed after it's introduced. And then the big part is referred to the committee. And each house has several standing committees which review and refine all the bills of the house. A lot of times it's pigeonholed, or a lot of times in the committee it's stopped and it's dead. So, but then the committee can refer to a subcommittee, and this subcommittee usually refers the bill to, the committee refers to the subcommittee, and then the subcommittee will refer it back to the committee so they can vote on it again, right, in the committee. Then number 6, it's reported by the full committee. We're still in the committee, and the committee can kill the bill, amend it, or draft a new version of the bill, or approve the original bill as it's written. So the committee say, yes, we approve it, yes, we've revised it, and or else we pigeonholed, we get rid of it, put it in a pigeonhole and forget about it, like you do on a desk with a whole bunch of little pockets. You put it in a pocket and forget about it. And so, or, they can have a total new version of the bill in the committee. So then it's reported to the whole House. So, especially in the House of Representatives. The committee reports the bill to the whole House, and the bill is listed on the calendar. In the House of Representatives, the bill is given to the Rules Committee. That's why I said to the Rules Committee. So the bill goes there, and then it's enacted upon by the entire House. After the debate, it goes on the floor. This is on the floor. So they go on the floor, and when they go up on the floor, they're debating. They're getting up and debating. And the House may either kill the bill, amend it, or pass it as it's written, as it's enacted upon. So, and okay, and it's acted upon by the opposite house. So one house passes the bill, then the bill is sent to the other house for consideration. In the opposite house, the bill must again pass through all these steps. All these steps that I just did. They have to go back to the introduction. Let's go back up there. Back to the introduction. Back to the committees or the subcommittees. Back to the floor to be debated on. And then at that point, the vote. They will vote on them. So then it's examined by the conference committee. So if a bill passes both houses, but with different versions, that means one house is saying, yes, we vote on the bill, and the other house is not, then the bill has to go to a conference committee. And in this conference committee is composed of members of each house. It's combination. And so that they may compromise to work out something, a vote on the bill, a compromise on the bill, I should say, so that they could both houses will compromise and say the bill is what they want. So a compromise bill is then reported to each house for approval, has to go back again to back to the houses, back to the Senate, back to the House, both houses, to vote on it again after it's the conference committee. So lots of committee work, huh? Finally, it's delivered to the president. And with 10 days after receiving the bill, only 10 days, Sundays are not included, and the president must either sign it or veto it. If he does neither, the Congress remains in session. Like I said, when the Congress is in session, as long as the Congress is in session, after 10 days, basically the bill is going to go through whether the president signs it or not. But if it's less than 10 days, then he can pocket veto it and just say, okay, Congress is not in session anymore, so the bill is dead, without saying anything. So the bill automatically becomes a law if he ignores it, ignores the bill. It automatically will become a law unless it's less than 10 days. And in that 10 days, he can pocket veto it. Otherwise, he can just veto it. If he vetoes it, he has to send it back and tell them why he's not, he's vetoing the bill or standing against the bill, and then it has to go all the way back. So it says here, if he ignores the bill and Congress adjourns before the 10-day period expires, the bill is dead, and this is called a pocket veto. So it looks like a long process, but just remember the basics. As you remember the basics, it's introduced, right? And then it's read by the Congress, and one Congress, then it goes to the committee, goes to the subcommittee, it's voted and reported on the committee, then it goes to the whole House committee if needed, or it goes to the floor, and then it's acted upon the floor, debates or whatever they need. And then if the two houses can't agree, because it goes back to the other house, and the other house goes all the way through and they don't agree, then they send it to a conference committee with both houses, the Senate and Congress, trying to make a compromise. And finally, it's delivered to the president. And the president can basically sign it, or veto it, or pocket veto it. Only pocket veto if it's less than 10 days. And he's, oh, I could just go ahead and forget about this bill, you know. So let's go on here if I can. Okay, come on. Oh, I had a note. Here we go. Okay. Here we go next. Okay, let's go back here and talk a little bit more about. We talked about the conference committee, right? But I want to talk a little bit more about the president vetoing it. Again, here it says the president can basically suddenly, as it goes through both houses, and both houses say yes and vote a yes on it, on the bill to become a law, then the president can sign it and it becomes a law, or does not sign it and it becomes a law in 10 days. So the president can say, I don't want to sign it, because he doesn't really agree with it, but he lets it become a law in 10 days. Provided that Congress is still in session, and then the Congress will adjourn. If it adjourns in 10 days, then it's a pocket veto, right? Then it kills the bill because the president hasn't signed it. But if the president does sign it, then it will stop the bill from passing, because veto means I forbid. So when you say veto a bill, you disagree with it. You say, I forbid this bill. So the president sends a message to Congress stating his objections to the bill, and then the Senate and the House may try to override the president. So if he vetoes it and he sends back and says why he vetoes the Senate, goes back to the Senate and the House, and they may try to override the president. And they can override the veto of the president by a 2/3 majority. So if they vote 2/3 majority in each house, they have that 2/3 majority is a pretty big majority. But if they're voting and they vote 2/3 majority in each house, they can go against the president, and the bill will become a law in spite of the president's veto. They'll override the president. But this is very rare. This doesn't happen very often. If you look at the presidents of the United States, I have to say, President Grover Cleveland, okay, he's kind of one who's not my favorite president. Let's just say a Democratic president, not my favorite. But he holds the records for the most vetoes of any two-term president. Cleveland vetoed 584 bills. Can you believe that? 584 bills. 346 of those bills were vetoes, and 238 of them were pocket vetoes, where he waited until those last 10 days and just did nothing on them, so they were vetoed. So Congress only was able to override 7 of them. So out of 583 bills, Congress can only vote 2/3 and override 7. So overriding bills doesn't happen very often. So I wanted to go over all that with bills, because that's important that you know what a bill goes through to become a law. Okay, now we're going to go into something else. This actually has to do with what the Congress, we're still telling what the Congress does, but the Congress represents the people, right? So the members of Congress must represent their constituent. A constituency is basically the voters who sent them there, that voted on them. So the Congress, whether they're a House member of Congress of their district, or they're the senator, they're supposed to represent the people who voted for them. As representatives, there are 2 main reasons, and these are reasons you need to know. First of all, to protect their constituency. That means from harmful legislation. So they're to protect us, the people who voted for them, from harmful legislation that would hurt us. So number 1, they're to protect us. So a representative, whether they're a senator or a congressman, they need to, or I should say a House of Representatives, they need to protect us from harmful laws or harmful legislation. That's foremost. And then they also need to promote beneficial legislation or beneficial laws for us. So they protect us from bad laws and they promote good laws. Those are the two things that they do. So the representation should represent character. Okay, what is character? So we have many qualities that we think are very good for humankind and for those that represented us, right? So we love them to be wise, have wisdom and insight, knowledge, determination, honesty, integrity. Those things are all important. But the most important is the person's character. And sometimes it's overlooked today. Character. What is character? Well, character is the essence of man. Its character is his thoughts, his words, and his actions. Not only can we say that he's wise, or he has knowledge, or he's honest, or he has integrity, but we look at his character on the whole of what his thoughts are on things, what his words are on things, and how he acts. And this is the character. A man of godly character will exhibit those traits that are in the Bible, right? Which include what? What traits are in the Bible? Truthfulness, purity, honor, justice, and faithfulness, right here. In the book of Exodus, God gives us a model of a good leader, and a good leader here that they give right here that you should know, and you can go back to your Bible and examine, would be the character of Moses, right? Moses did not always start off as a good character either. But he led the children out of Egypt, and one of his responsibilities was to judge the people according to God's law. And God gave him the 10 Commandments to judge the people. The Israelites came to him with their legal disputes, and they heard cases. And from this whole of judging the people, you can imagine there were 3 million people in just Moses. And so because of this, his father-in-law Jethro said, we need to appoint some other people to help you, Moses, which they did. So Moses followed Jethro's advice and distributed the burden of leadership. And the types of leaders Jethro told Moses to appoint were those that are able. That means they are competent. They're competent. They're able to do it. They fear God. They are truthful. And they hate covetousness. So when you look at you, first of all, you know that they're able, they're wise, and they're competent, and they can do a job. But also they fear God. So they have moral values. But also they're truthful on issues, on any issues, and truthful in their life. And they hate covetousness. Basically, they hate, they're not greedy, and they don't covet other people's goods. So those are the qualities. And these are listed in Exodus 18:21, and they're still the best qualities for a leader today. So men who are competent can perform the required task, and they will be productive for the people they serve, but they must fear God when they make their laws. And they must have moral God. They must be in accord with God's moral law. Anything that goes against, if the 10 Commandments or goes against God's law, they should not do, even if the people tell them to do. Of course, the people at that time were messed up. You know, when Moses came back, they were dancing naked in front of a golden calf. You know, so they were just turned into idolaters. You know, so you know the heart of man is heart of man is evil. You know, but we know through God we can have the power, especially in that being born of the Spirit. But we'll get into that. So anyway, sorry. So the views of representation. Well, it says, finally, it is interesting that the 4 qualifications listed above, only one has to do with ability, while 3 of them, God-fearing, truthful, hating covetousness, have to do with morality. So the kinds of qualifications that comprise a leader of character have a lot to do with other things besides if he's capable or not. Have to do with his integrity. So how important it is for representative, and you know now in politics, there's a lot of politicians that do not have integrity these days. We know that. So, and the reason they don't, because a lot of them don't believe, in the law. A lot of them don't believe in the law of the Bible, I should say. So, the views of representation. There are two views. So let's go over those two views. One basically is a trustee, and the other down here is a delegate. So what's the difference between a trustee and a delegate? Well, Edmund Burke, remember Edmund Burke, he was of the Parliament. This is before, the United States, or during the time the United States became a nation. Edmund Burke said, he was an Irishman, and we did a little thing on Edmund Burke. The representative votes according to his personal judgment rather than the views of his constituency, making the best judgment, sometimes not viewed same as the majority of the constituents. So basically what it says, the representative votes according to his personal judgment rather than his views. So it's basically saying that a trustee votes what is right and just, votes for in his conscience. As it was his conscience. Down here, it's quoted here. Your representative owes you not his industry only, but his judgment, and he betrays instead of serving you if he sacrifices it to your opinion. So a trustee basically needs to, first of all, he stands for you, but he also stands for God first. I like that. So he will betray. If you are telling him to do something wrong, he will betray that because he sacrifices your opinion for God's opinion. That's a trustee. Onto a delegate, and the delegate is opposite. In a delegate position, the representative votes according to the desires of his constituency rather than his personal judgment. So he'll just vote whatever you tell him to vote. That's a delegate. So basically, whatever he stands for, whether it's good, if he believes good things, he still has to vote for the bad things that his constituency, that he represents. An example would be the New York governor, Mario Cuomo, who said in 1984 he was pro-life, but his constituency, being a Democrat, was pro-choice. So he used this reasoning to justify his pro-abortion position. So he says, yeah, I'm voting pro-abortion, but I don't believe in pro-abortion, but I have to represent as a delegate to them as whatever they want instead of what I want. So you see the difference now. A trustee is going to vote for first of all, what's right, his conscience, so it's right in God, and then his constituency, those people that have voted him as a representative. But first and most, he's going to vote what's right. A delegate will vote whether it's wrong or right. If the people come and say, well, you are our delegate, you have to vote the way we tell you to vote, even if you think it's wrong. So that's the difference between a delegate and a trustee. So let's see. This talks about oversight, but let's go here. We're talking about, here's Noah Webster believed that officials should be elected based on good character. So, of course, that's what we should say. Basically, Noah Webster, when a citizen gives his suffrage, that's his vote, to a man of unknown immorality, he abuses his trust. He sacrifices not only his own interest, but that of his neighbor. He betrays the interest of his country. So what he's saying here, how important it is when a citizen gives your vote, when you vote for one, make sure you're voting for a man that you know about. When I was young, I just thought, I went to vote and I thought, I don't even know, I'm just going to guess. If you don't know, don't vote. Just leave it blank. So make sure you know who you're voting for. So even as young people going in there and saying, okay, I get to vote, make sure you investigate who you're voting for, because you may be voting for a tyrant, a bad guy, right? So he's saying how important it is not to vote for a man that you don't know his positions and his morality, right? So, and also he said a representative should act accordingly to his conscience. Whatever consequences happen to choose. You must choose rightly. And sometimes a representative has difficult choices because they have to stand against what is wrong and stand up for what's right. And sometimes that's difficult in politics, isn't it? And basically, a representative is elected to make tough choices. Here's that quote I wrote from Noah Webster. You know who Noah Webster was? He was the one that wrote the Webster's dictionary that we have, right? He was a man of great character, born again. So anyway, let's talk a little about representation and republicanism. So what's republicanism? Well, Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. The United States guarantees to every state a republican form of government. Basically what they're saying, every single state now has that republican form of government. So what's a republican form of government? A republican is where we elect representatives to represent us, to represent the people. That's republican. We have a republican form of government that is limited by our Constitution, right? So each state, they call it the scheme of representation. Every single state, their state government. First of all, we have the federal government, and that's the national government, our nation as a whole, and that's where we pay the IRS and such. And then we have our state government, and that's where we pay our state taxes. Each state is different, right? But that state has its own government, and the state government has to be republican, just like our national government is. That's all that means. And then it goes on here that many nations call themselves republics, other nations. But our founding fathers truly represented a republican government in that point of being guided by our Constitution. So, and that republican represents the people through chosen representatives. And our republican avoids the extremes. So in a lot of different republics that say they're republic, they say, okay, we're just going to have the people all vote, and they have mob voting. Democratic voting in democratic government in that sense can turn into a mob rule. And after mob rule comes in, it's very easy for a tyrant to take over, that's for sure. And they rules by anarchy and chaos, right? So, and then of course we have the tyranny of a monarch, or I should say an autocracy, or basically that rule by one, and that can happen. A democracy can easily turn into a tyranny or dictatorship in a minute. Let's just say that. So how important it is for us to have that Constitution as well as being representative. So let's talk a little bit about oversight here. So what is oversight? Oversight is where the Congress now, which is basically the House of Representatives and the Senate, is to act as a watchdog of the federal government, particularly of the bureaucracies of the executive branch. Watch over, not only that, the Supreme Court too. So the watchdog of the federal government. So Congress is looking at, monitors the various executive agencies that are being made, that the president has approved of, his secretaries, the Secretary of State, all the secretaries, and all of the executive agencies, and we're going to learn a lot about them. But Congress acts as a watchdog over these. Oversight is the congressional monitoring of the bureaucracy to make sure that the laws are being faithfully executed. Basically saying, are the laws being executed by the executive branch? Executed means executive branch. And who's in the executive branch? The president, vice president, and all of his cabinet members, all down to the agencies. So Congress's responsibility. Congress has the right to cut funding to executive branch, investigate certain agencies if they're not up and up, if they're against the law, to investigate these agencies. They even have what's called sunset laws. A sunset law gives a termination date for a bureaucracy, a bureaucratic agency. So basically saying this agency will stand until this date. And after this date, they'll have to vote again whether this agency should be an agency. So they call that sunset law, laws that give a termination date. So here's some pictures of House oversight committees here in this picture. So on to a little bit more about the oversight. The sunset laws oversight can be very simple. It's when they call the head of the agency and talk to the head of the agency and see what's going on. The oversight of Congress also going to be very formal, as they set budget hearings, or they create committees to investigate wrongdoings of the executive branch, even the president. Committees are based on the division of labor. There may be committees for finances, like they're breaking their financial responsibility. They may be judiciary committees, environmental committees that are labor committees, have to do with labor, and veterans committees that monitor the veterans affairs. All these things are committees that are overlooking agencies under the executive branch. And they're using their power of oversight. And that power is given to them by what? By the Constitution. In fact, there have been some scandals. Let's talk about some scandals that have happened. So, the Watergate scandal. Have you heard of that? That spying on the one party spying on the other. The Iran-Contra scandal. The Whitewater scandal that had to do with President Clinton. All these things are scandals. Basically, Congress is going in and investigating the scandals of the executive branch, or the bureaucracies, which are the executive branch. So they invoked selective committees to investigate. So, and on to talking about this, Congress has also used the legislative veto of the last few years to monitor the bureaucracies. A legislative veto is Congress forbidding the implementation of an agency's policy without the president's consent. So, what does that mean? The Supreme Court declared the legislative veto unconstitutional in 1983 because, according to the court, the veto violated the separation of powers. However, Congress has continued to use this legislative veto. So, legislative veto, but why is it so strange? Because it's a veto of Congress that forbids the president, forbids the implementation of the agency's policy without the president's consent. Basically saying we can veto something without the president saying so. So that's the deal. It doesn't happen that often, and even the Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional, but it still happens. It's where the Congress vetoes over the president's consent. Okay? Legislative veto, they call that. So, here's a picture of the Department of Veteran Affairs there as they were investigating veteran affairs. So let's go over quickly here your section review, and then we'll be done with this section 3. So, questions. First question, what is a bill? Explain the difference between public bills and private bills. A bill is a new proposed law. A law has been proposed, wanting to become a law. So a bill is a proposed law. Public bills apply to our nation at large, and private bills only apply to certain individual groups or individual citizens. Number 2, describe the process a bill must follow to get through Congress. So first of all, it has to be introduced, right, by a congressman, and then it has committee action, which goes into all kinds of actions, committee actions and subcommittee, all in the same. And after it goes through the committees, and then it goes to the floor, and the floor action. From the floor action, is where the vote. They can filibuster the floor and keep it from the floor. They do that in the Senate, but the floor action is important. And from the floor action, their vote will go to from the House. It has to go through the House and then has to go to the Senate too. Both places, or from the Senate to the House. And then they have a conference. If they don't agree, if the Senate does not agree with the House of Representatives, they have a conference committee. And from that conference committee, it goes right back to the House and to the Senate for a vote. And then when it finally is voted to become a law, it goes to the president, and the president acts on it. And that president can either veto it, say no, and send it back and say why, or can sign it into a law, or can pocket veto, just forget about it for 10 days, and when the Congress is not in session, after 10 days, it just is put in his pocket. You never see it again. So, number 3, what is the purpose of congressional committees? Oh, the committees. Okay. The committees are most important. They have committees and subcommittees. And this is where the most action place, where they go over the bills. Most bills don't even get out of the committees. Only 10% of the bills. You could have 9,000 bills go through, and only 10% will go through the committee to become laws, right? So it screens out the bills. Number 4, what does it mean to pigeonhole a bill? To pigeonhole a bill, means to put it aside and forget about it. So they take it and they put it aside like in a roll top desk. They put it in a little hole and they'll forget about it. Number 5, name 3 ways a congressional vote may be taken. By a voice vote, they all can say yay, nay, and they vote on that. And that's for something that's not very controversial, of course. A standing vote. Those that are for the vote will stand, and those that aren't won't. The roll call vote will go over the roll call, and then basically it'll all be put, on a congressional record on what senators and what congressmen vote for each bill. Number 6, what will happen if the president does not sign a bill? So if the president does not sign a bill, it will become a law in 10 days. Or if the Congress is out of session in 10 days, it will pocket veto and be dead and have to go all the way through again. So number 7, what fraction of the vote must Congress have to override a president veto? So the president vetoes it and says, no way, I don't want it, sends it back, and this basically to override that veto, that each House and the Senate have to vote 2/3 majority, which is a big majority. 2/3 of the majority of each of the houses have to vote to make it a law to override the president. 2/3 majority. What is the twofold purpose of a representative in the legislative process? So, first of all, to be a representative, there's 2 things you have to stand for. Is to stand for your constituency. That's the people who vote for you. First of all, you have to protect them from harmful legislation. Protect them from terrible laws that would hurt them. And number 2, to promote beneficial legislation. So you protect them from bad laws, and then you can promote good laws for them. That's what it is. Number 9, name the most important quality for a leader to possess. Why is this trait important? Character is the most. Character is the essence of the man, and his thoughts and his words and his action, so that you can trust and honor him, right? Number 10, contrast the trustee view of representatives with the delegate view. So the trustee votes according to his personal judgment, and the delegate basically will vote on whatever his voters tell him to vote on, right? So a trustee will vote because he'll think, even if something is wrong, he will not vote on it, even if the people tell him to vote that way. But the delegate will basically vote on anything said, because he represents that person, whether it's bad or good. So, what form of government does the Constitution require every state to possess? Republican government. Republican is basically voting for those representatives to represent them, even in the state. So, and oversight, we talked about oversight. I'm not going to go over oversight. It's basically where Congress is the watchdog of the federal government. And so they can basically see scandals that are happening in bureaucracies of the executive branch, or judicial, other branches, mainly the executive branch. And oversight is watching over to make sure that the executive branch is executing the laws, and that they can basically even veto if something is drastically wrong. So it's basically the Congress overlooking the executive branch, overlooking the president, and overlooking the bureaucracies. So that's it.